Hello everyone, welcome to another video. I hope that you are very well, that you're having a lovely day. Today is an exciting day for a number of reasons. The first one is the day I'm filming this is the 8th of March, which is International Women's Day. So happy International Women's Day. I did do a video last week with some feminist fiction recommendations to celebrate, so feel free to check that out. It is also a very exciting day because it's snowing outside. It has not snowed where I live, I think in 5 years, not properly. And it's properly snowing. So today is a good day. And I'm bringing you my February wrap-up today. As with my January wrap-up, we're switching things up a bit. Instead of just going through in chronological order, we're ranking the books that I read in February from my least favourite to my favourite book that I read this month. I read a lot of books in February, which is strange because I feel like I didn't. I definitely had a little mini reading slump halfway through the month, and I was kind of kicking myself for not reading as much, and then I would look at how much I'd already read that month and feel fine about it. So yes, I read a lot of books in February, and all of them were 3 stars or above. This is a usual month for me. I very rarely rate below 3 stars, and that's mostly because I only pick up books if I think I will enjoy them, and if I don't enjoy them, I usually DNF them. So it's rare that I complete a book that I am not enjoying enough to give it less than 3 stars. So all of this month's books are 3 stars and above, but not all 3 stars are created equal. So with that in mind, let's get straight in with my least favourite book this month. So the least favourite book that I read this month was Arthur and Teddy Are Coming Out by Ryan Love, and I was so disappointed because I had such high hopes for this book. This is a contemporary story about a grandfather and grandson who both come out as gay at around the same time, and they're kind of parallel coming out stories, how their lives are different, how it affects their family. So that's the kind of main plot, the main premise, and on that it delivered. I really liked their sort of grandfather-grandson relationship. Both of their coming out stories were very heartwarming and tender, and the different lives that they have both lived was just a really interesting way to frame this story. But I also had some huge issues with this book. I won't go in detail for 2 reasons. 1, spoilers. 2, there are some quite substantial trigger warnings surrounding the things that I had issue with in this book. So I will leave my written review in the description, a link to that if you would like to read that, and that has all the spoilery things that I did not like. There were some very heavy issues that I did not think were dealt with well at all. One felt very exploitative in particular, and also the epilogue was just a hot mess. So some of it was great and some of it was really not, which is why this is my least favourite book I read in February. The next one only just screeches in. I was on the fence for so long as to which of these two was my least favourite book from this month, and that is In Memoriam by Alice Wynne. And this is a First World War historical fiction about 2 school friends who are not so secretly in love with each other, who go off to fight in the First World War. Again, there were some things it did really well. Their relationship between the 2 friends was really good and very sort of compelling and emotional, and the way that the war was depicted was very brutal and really sort of didn't hold back on the depiction of warfare. It was a very vivid and shocking depiction, which is how it should be, because war. In-depth analysis with me. But again, there were some things that just did not work for me. Twice in this book, a character died, and then we found out many months later it was actually a prisoner of war and they were fine. Once is like a plot twist, twice is just lazy writing. Yeah, there were other things that I just did not work for me. Yeah, lots of things that just didn't quite sit right. And again, the ending. It's just the ending did not land. And I think I've talked about this before with, what was the book? One Night in Heartswood. With queer historical fiction, then it's always going to be hard to land a happy ending because there's going to be a lot of compromises, right? And this one just didn't do it for me. It was a very serious, very dark book. So having a very kind of, oh, it's fine, we've figured everything out, we're just going to go live our lives very richly, very happily off in Brazil or somewhere. It just didn't really fit with the tone of the book. So yes, this was a 3 stars and was almost my least favourite book of the month. The final 3-star read for me this month, and this one I was on the fence as to 3 stars or 4 stars, so very much a much better 3-star book, was Plain Bad Heroines by Emily M. Danforth. This book was all the rage a couple of years ago, and it came up on NetGalley, and I requested it, and I only just read it. And by read it, I mean I listened to the audiobook on Scribd so that I could read it while also reading my current NetGalley reads. This is a queer horror with dual timelines, and so the one timeline is in like the 1910s in an all-girls boarding school, and the other one is in modern day Hollywood. They are making a film of the terrible things that happened in the boarding school. So a really cool idea of these 2 timelines, and I really liked the historical timeline especially. All of the horror bits were really good, really creepy. Absolutely loved them. My favourite characters were the first ones to die, which, you know, it was a long book and that was a long time to go when your favourite characters have already died. It was just too long. It was just too long. I think if it had been 100 pages shorter, because it was like 600 pages, this book, 100 pages less, and I would have enjoyed it much, much more. So yes, lots of really, really good things. Just needs one ruthless edit, and then it would have been amazing. Okay, we are on to 4 stars now. And the next one, again, this is one I was on the fence as to 3 or 4 stars and just about gave it 4. And that is No Life for a Lady by Hannah Dolby. This is, again, historical fiction. It's a kind of coming-of-age story, sort of. A bit of a, well, coming into your own rather than coming-of-age story. And follows a young woman whose mother has been missing for 10 years, and she decides she's going to go and find her mother. So she hires a private investigator. She does some digging of her own to find out where her mother has gone. The focus of the story is very much on Violet, the main character, her emotional journey, her growth, her kind of coming to terms with what being an adult means slightly later than most. And what I really appreciated about this book is a lot of the stereotypical portrayals of young women in the past, very much looking at you, Daphne Bridgerton, kind of rely on this trope of women being uninformed, and everyone being very sort of clutching at their pearls all the time. And what I liked is that this had that, but without that being the reason, if that makes sense. So Violet was very innocent and naive and not informed about the world, but that was because she didn't have a mother at the essential time of her life, and her father was very much emotionally absent. So it's kind of her finding her place, having never had someone to help her find her place in the world and in society. The ending was, some of the ending I loved, some of it was a bit of a letdown. It was very like bish bash bosh sorted, in a slightly overdramatic way, and I would have liked a kind of more satisfactory full ending, but it was great fun. I had a great time. Moving up is Shadows on the Border by A.L. Lester. I listened to the audiobook for this, and this is a sequel to Lost in Time, which I discussed for my January wrap-up, and as predicted, the second one I very much enjoyed more than the first one. The world is really well established, the characters are really well established, and A.L. Lester writes brilliant characters. Every single one of their books that I've read, no matter how long they are, even the shortest novellas, all the characters are so vividly created and just so present in the story. That's like one of my favourite things about them as a writer. So it was really great to see the characters better established, and kind of progress in this world. I really liked the themes that were explored, and how lots of modern ideas were explored using a historical but also paranormal lens. So yeah, lots going on. Really enjoyed this one. It's in my 4-star list. The next one is Kololo Hill by Nima Shah. This is not a finished copy. This is an ARC that I bought in a charity shop. To be fair to the charity shop people, it does not say do not sell. They probably didn't realise. And, you know, the money went to charity. So yes, it does not look like this if you were to buy it in a shop now. And this is a historical fiction novel about the Ugandan Asian population who were forced to flee Uganda in the 1970s and return to India or travel to Britain or travel to a country they have never been to before that they might not have any ties to. This feels very poignant at the moment. There is a lot of very strict migration laws being introduced in the UK, which are horrendous, and this is a sort of book that more politicians should read because it might change their perspective. I mean, who are kidding? It won't, but it should. And this is a part of British history that I knew nothing about, so it was really nice to kind of learn about that through this book. And it follows one family and their journey and where they will end up, how their lives are changed. And what I really liked is that it didn't have a nice, neat, happy ending, that things weren't all fixed by the end and everyone had changed quite dramatically over the course of this story. Still in the 4-star zone, this is the one that I picked when I did the Try a Chapter tag, and it is Sleeping Giants by Sylvain Neveu, using my Key Stage 3 French to pronounce that one. This is such an intriguing and unusual story. So at the very, very start, then a child finds a giant robot hand, basically. And it becomes the obsession of her life. She grows up to kind of lead the investigation as to what this hand is, what it's part of, where it came from. And it kind of unravels this wider story about pre-human civilization, what was happening in Earth, and may have travelled from other worlds as well. The really interesting thing about this book is that it's written in case files. So instead of having sort of chapters of prose, then each chapter is mostly interviews, sometimes scientific logs, sometimes press releases, sometimes phone calls, all sorts of different things all put together to tell the story. And so many interesting ideas touched upon. It was really, really great. Lots of great things and great ideas in here. And there was a plot twist, I won't tell you where, so that you don't know when you read it, that I did not see coming, and I really should have, but I absolutely did not. The top 4-star book, and this was kind of just eking into 5 stars, is Shadowlands by Matthew Green. This is a non-fiction book. It is about history, specifically British history, as told through the story of settlements, villages, towns that have been lost to time or abandoned or destroyed. And that's such a cool way to approach it. I really liked that idea and that approach. There was so much fascinating stuff in here, from Neolithic villages to a Welsh village that was drowned in the 1960s. It was a really great look at a very broad time period, lots of different geographical places that are all tied together by being part of this little group of islands that have just been inhabited for a few thousand years, and kind of telling that story. The reason I did give it 4 stars instead of 5 stars is one of the chapters in particular just felt very out of place. It wasn't really about history, and it was much more sort of about, aren't military tactics fun? And that kind of didn't really vibe with the rest of the story. Also, side note, I listened to the audiobook, which was narrated by the author, and I mean, I'm not really one to comment on Welsh pronunciation. I am by no means a fluent Welsh speaker. Even I knew that some of those were wrong. Just saying. We are into the 5-star zone, my friends, and the first 5-star book that I'm going to talk to you about is Love That Journey for Me by Emily Garside. This is one of the Inklings, which is a series of non-fiction books, kind of little essay collections on very specific cultural topics. And as soon as I heard about this, I was like, I have to read it. They are currently doing a Kickstarter for their 3rd series of Inklings. I will leave the link in the description if I remember to. And yes, this is about the TV show Schitt's Creek, spelt Schitt, very important. And it's about how the show created a kind of queer utopia, and all the ways that queer culture are used and addressed and expanded in the show. There's not really much I can say that would make sense to someone who hasn't watched the show. And if you have watched the show, I would say just read it. It was really great. So just read it. And if you need to watch the show first, watch the show first. That's all I'm going to say because it was great. The next one is Catherine Howard, The Tainted Queen by Alison Weir. This is the 5th in the 6 Tudor Queens series. I'm nearly at the end. This series has taken me so long to read, but I am nearly there. And this one is about, obviously, Catherine Howard, the 5th wife of Henry VIII, who was beheaded. And this is one I was very intrigued about because in Alison Weir's non-fiction, she's quite dismissive of Catherine Howard, as a lot of historians are. And so I was very intrigued to see how she would approach writing a fiction story where she is the main character, because she is definitely a sympathetic person. She got beheaded by her own husband for having boyfriends before him. So, you know, that's a sympathetic character if there ever was one. So it was very interesting to see her take on Catherine Howard, and it was just heartbreaking. It was so tragic. If you don't know Catherine Howard's story, I mean, it's just awful. Wikipedia, the 6 soundtrack, whatever will get you there. And there are a lot of questions surrounding Catherine Howard. For example, we don't even know what year she was born in. A lot of the questions surrounding the exact nature of the things that happened to her are very murky, and this book I thought did a good job of sort of picking a likely path for all of those. Some of the books in this series, and by some I mean the Anne of Cleves one, took a lot of liberties with history. This one, not quite so much, which I really appreciated. I think Catherine Howard is someone who deserves to have her story told as it is. I was so torn when I got to these last 2 books as to which one should be the best one of the month, but the more I thought about it, the more there was a clear winner. So the second best book I read this month is Stateless by Elizabeth Vine, and this was so good. Like, I mean, I was expecting to enjoy it, that's why I picked it up, but it was so good. The story is set in the late 1930s, and there is an aeroplane race happening for young people from various European countries to promote peace, and obviously that didn't work. But the main character is Stella. She is the only female contestant, and she is the representative from Britain, but she has a secret, and that secret is that she is a refugee. Again, very, very timely. And so the race starts, and she witnesses one of the planes be taken down by another one, and she doesn't know who did it or why and who might be next. And so she has to kind of uncover what has happened. And, you know, obviously this is a very fraught time in European history. And so travelling from country to country is not the easiest thing to do. So there are various escapades, things that happen in different parts of Europe. It was just a really great read, a really, really great story. The characters were all very sort of vivid and very fleshed out. They were really, really sort of good 3-dimensional characters. The main romantic relationship felt very natural, even though it was pretty obvious from like the first page who was going to get together. Sometimes that's what you need, and then you can just watch them slowly become friends and fall in love. And there were twists and turns along the way. It was just a really great read. And so we have reached the best book that I read in February, and that is Catfish Rolling by Clara Kumagi. Again, this one, I thought I would enjoy it. I did not realise how much I would love this book. It was absolutely incredible, so moving, so clever, such a brilliantly put together work of fiction. The main character is Sora. She is a young woman living in Japan, and her mother died during a devastating earthquake several years earlier. And she is convinced that her mother is still out there and that she has to find her. And in this sort of mythological science fiction kind of twist on the world, then the earthquake didn't just move the ground, it also created fractures in time. And you can travel inside these time zones. Some of them time moves faster, some of them time moves slower, but you can't stay too long because they will have adverse effects on humans. And her father is researching these time zones and is experiencing these effects. The whole book is inspired by the Japanese legend that there is a catfish that is pinned underneath the islands, and when it wriggles, that's when there are earthquakes, and it's trying to swim free. So that's the kind of theme and legend that underpins the whole story. You've got fantasy and mythology and science fiction all kind of wrapped together, and it all works so brilliantly. But really it's about grief and family and longing and learning to let go of someone. There were so many layers to this book, and it's so brilliantly put together. It's one of those books that shouldn't work, but it does. And every single aspect of it was just landed perfectly. Oh, it was so good. It was one of those where you read it and you just have to sit there and just be like, that was amazing. That was amazing. We have made it to the end of my very long February wrap up. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments what you read this February. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and click on the subscribe button if you would like to see more videos from me. Thank you very much, and I will see you next time. Ta-ra for now.